Welcome everyone. We have about 90 people on and I'm sure people will trickle in as we get going. My name is Ankur Patel. I am the Director of Advancement for Hindu University of America. And this is a really special webinar, right? The story of Hinduism in the diaspora. And our diaspora spans the globe, and you're gonna get to see that in today's webinar, from Trinidad and Guyana, Suriname, Fiji, Mauritius to Africa. And, I was born in Los Angeles. So unlike some of the more recent immigration to North America and the United Kingdom, many of our friends and relatives in the Hindu diaspora and Hindu migrants of the early 19th century were actually brought as indentured laborers and faced extreme hardship. There's a lot that we can learn from our Hindu diaspora. And so I'm going to introduce our panelists. Of course, we have Sharian Singh, the president of Hindu University of America. I'm not going to give him an introduction. He's going to give a framing of the webinar after I introduce our panelists. So first, we have Dr. Pandita Indrani Ramprasad, and it's been my pleasure to get to talk to her and get to know some of the work that she's done. She's a women's activist, and in 2013 was awarded Trinidad and Tobago's National Award for Outstanding Contribution to Women in Development. She's completed all her tertiary education in India at the Banaras Hindu University. And she's worked as a teacher and a journalist in Trinidad and New York. She's the first first state certified female Vedic Hindu priest in the Arya Samaj in Trinidad and Tobago. And work on that echo. So as you sign on to different devices, make sure you don't have more than one on, please. Sorry for that interruption. And Indrani ji is actually a peace advocate who propagates mutual respect as a necessity for harmonious living and sees cultural identity, right? Cultural identity is a human right, and that's kind of a big part of today's webinar. Next, we have Professor Anand Singh, and he's been a professor, lecturer in anthropology since 1986 at the University of Durban, Westville, actually created in apartheid South Africa. And he's got a whole history of how the education institutions in South Africa have changed. He's a specialist researcher in anthropology of minorities, identity politics, and long distance nationalism, absentee patriotism. Very interesting concept for us in the Hindu diaspora. Next, we have Dr. Sharian Singh, lecturer of Indian History and Indian Diaspora Studies in the Department of History, University of the West Indies, St. Augustine in Trinidad and Tobago. She specializes in social, religious, and cultural transformation among Indians in Trinidad and in the Caribbean. That social, cultural transformation is part of what Hindu University of America is all about. In Hinduism and the Ramayana tradition in the Indian diaspora, and she's also specialized on the Indian indenture system. So in addition to many published articles, her monograph, the Ramayana Tradition and Socio-Religious Change in Trinidad, 1917 to 1990, was published in 2012. And she's currently the head of the Department of History and coordinator of the MA program in history. Next, we have Shri Sailesh Kumar, who's an educator with an extensive background in teaching secondary and tertiary students. He's experienced teaching English and Hindi in Tonga, Kiribati, Nauru, and is currently a lecturer at the University of Fiji. His resume is extensive and diverse, including an accomplished career in media, and he's actually served as the Hindi Cultural Advisor for the Department of Culture and Heritage, Ministry of Education in Fiji. And he's actually presented on numerous papers and numerous conferences and papers, including challenges of teaching Hindi in Fijian secondary schools and religion and sustainable development, a Hindu perspective. And finally, we have Dr. Irvin Desesser from Mauritius. He's presently heads the School of Mauritian and Area Studies of the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Mauritius, promoting studies in Indian culture and traditions. His contribution in the field of education, research, and folklore and oral traditions of Indian immigrants and media has been acclaimed and rewarded by the government of Mauritius through its parent ministry and the international and some international universities, associations, and academies. So we have obviously a very impressive, diverse set of panelists today. And let's hand it over to Kalyanji to give smooth out the edges and give the rest of this webinar some context and get us started. Kalyanji.
Okay, thank you, Ankur, and thank you all for joining today. I want to welcome everybody, all the panelists, as well as the attendees. We have like 140 plus people on this webinar. I'm very happy to note that it's been subscribed to substantially. I'm going to begin with a quick question on the chat window, just so everybody can get a sense of who is here in the webinar. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question, and kindly just type in your answer. Okay, question is, where are you from? Just type in your answer, and everybody can see where we're all from. Colorado, New York, Chicago, Trinidad, USA, Piscataway, Phoenix, San Jose, Arizona, Los Angeles, Kansas, Texas, Austin. Okay, Nairobi, Kenya. Okay, nice. Trinidad, South Africa. Okay, Muscat, Durban. All right, we've got a very diverse audience here today. Okay, so I want to take a minute and welcome all of you to this interesting webinar. Now, please do send your replies to the category in the chat window called all panelists and attendees. All panelists and attendees. Otherwise, it'll just go to the panelists or just go to the attendees. Okay, great. So, you know, obviously, Hindus have migrated to different parts of the world over time under conditions that were great and conditions not so great at various times. And we have an outstanding group of panelists today. I'd like to have them, each of them, say a few words about themselves, you know, and take about maybe 3 minutes each, 3 or 4 minutes at the most, and share a little bit of their own history, in the sense that not only their personal history, but the history of their community, how it began, when it began, under what conditions, and so on. So why don't I begin with Indrani Ramprasadji, and then we'll go to Sharian Singh. Okay, Indrani ji, you're going to have to unmute your yeah.
Kalyanji, can I ask you to kind of let Sharian go first, because I want to build on what she says,
okay,
rather
wonderful.
than us duplicating.
Okay, very good. Okay, Sharian, it's yours. So you'll have to unmute yourself, please. Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Sharian Singh. As Ankurji said, I lecture at the University of the West Indies, and I specialize in diaspora studies. My journey to this point, culturally, academically, started, I think, from when I was very small. I mean, I grew up immersed in Hinduism. At that time, I grew up within the context of a village, and in the 1970s, all villages, predominantly Indian villages, they were very, very immersed in Hinduism, and of course with the smaller Islamic community, those people are also immersed in their religion. So I grew up with this sense, and then when I attended university, I found this niche. I didn't know before that, you know, you can actually do Indian cultural studies or history at the tertiary level. So that is where I think I found my calling that led to this path. I belong to, let's say, 4th or 5th generation of Indians or Hindus in Trinidad. One of my great-grandfathers was born on a ship in Trinidad. And on my father's side, my great-great-grandfather came from India. So it's 4th and 5th generation. The context in terms of my community, well, as of most of you would know, Trinidad's history, the Indians in Trinidad, their history is rooted in the Indian indenture system. The system was implemented in the Caribbean, not just Trinidad. In the Caribbean, hot on the heels of the abolition of African enslavement. Enslavement was abolished in 1834. And of course, Indian indentureship, the sustained system was implemented in 1845. One shipment had gone to Guyana in 1838. So that was the general context. What I would like to say also is that, you know, sometimes people look at the indenture system as a new system of slavery, a replacement for it, and so forth. We have to recognize that there were differences. There were differences. There were similarities. So the Indians basically came to replace the labor that the African enslaved individuals had provided. It is common thought, misplaced thought though, that there was a gap in the labor market. There was no gap. The colonial authorities, of course, Trinidad was a colony then, the colonial authorities preferred to bring the Indians because they were cheaper. Because after the Africans had, after abolition of slavery, they refused to work for paltry conditions. I mean, what was being offered to them still were conditions that were similar to slavery. They refused, and of course now the British said, well, we will look to India, and India was already a colony, the gem in their crown, so to speak. So they brought the Indians to the Caribbean to, you know, as an alternative to African labor. So this is the context. I mean, there's so much I can say about indentureship, but just in a nutshell, this is the context within which, and of course, when indentureship was brought to an end, 1917, 1920, communities emerged. Even from as early as the 1890s, communities started emerging. And of course, one of the first things that Indians or Hindus and even Muslims would tend to focus on was the reconstruction of religion and culture. And that, of course, was a process that, you know, saw so much creative energies. You saw the strengths of the individuals and the communities coming out in this process, some of the weaknesses also. But it was a very multi-dimensional, very dynamic process that, you know, continues to happen even until today. So I will invite Indrani now to add.
Well, namaste all. Thank you very much, Sherry, for that excellent exposition. I'll just add, like Suriname. Suriname came through the Dutch, and somehow Suriname, they were able to retain their language and their culture much more than we were in the British colonies. So my journey, I entered the world of Dharma through yoga. That's where my interest was. I was about 15 years old when I picked up the Bhagavad Gita to read. And I said, oh my God, what kind of God is this fighting? I don't like him. And I put the Gita down. And then my search continued and continued. And in my family, I was the first one. I was weird. I was the first one that said at 15, I want a guru. I was just 15. And you know, I grew up, unlike Sherry, I grew up in a semi-urban area of San Juan, where we didn't have many Indians around us, but we had a strong, the Pandit would come once a year to change the Jhandi. You know, to those of you who come from Bihar and UP would know the concept of our Jhanda, where with pujas and so on, it's an annual renewal of the Jhanda, which is a connection between ourselves and the cosmos. So I'd see that once a year. I'd see the Pandit once a year. But within me, there was this, this search, and my father died very young, when I was very young, 8. So when he died, I wanted to know more, death and life and so on. And that's how my journey began there, and it got strengthened in yoga. And I went to Banaras Hindu University as a 19-year-old who didn't know a single word of Hindi, not a single word of Hindi. And I found myself there trying to learn something more about Dharma. I was hugely disappointed, you know, and I cannot forgive India. To this day, I say, India has cheated me of a lot of my, maybe I'm emotional in saying it, and maybe there are conditions, but I'm telling you what I feel. I feel cheated because my whole life could have gone in another direction. I came as a 19-year-old looking for more of Dharma, and look at where I went, Banaras Hindu University. Which
And
better place than that?
so Indraniji, so you went looking for dharma, and what did you find?
Well, I did find it in the informal sector. Wherever I heard of a Swami, I would go running to find them. You know, I did see Prabhupada ji, Swami Prabhupada at Banaras Indian University.
Mhm.
I was blessed to see him, and Ma Amritananda also. So I found an India that has remained with me. I found a part of me there. You know, I cannot ever lose that. India has to grow on you, and Banaras grew on me. I love the place. But you know, I want to say I still remain disappointed. I wish there was something. Maybe it's no, I don't say karma. I don't like the fatalistic view of karma. I feel I had to divert. I did my bachelor's with Indian philosophy anyway. It came out Indian philosophy, geography, and English, but no other scope for me to go in dharma. There were courses for the pujaris and so on, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted academic pursuit of dharma, as Hindu University of America is now doing. So at my age, and when I should be taking sannyas now, I'm back as a student at Hindu University of America, learning what I wanted to learn when I was 19 years old. So thank you, Hindu University of America. And how I became a Pandita in Trinidad, I was concerned about the representation of Hindus at the national level. And I found there wasn't that educated voice and aware, consciously aware of how to join the national debate. And so my grandfather said, why don't you become a Pandita? I never thought of it. And I said, okay, I will. And that's how I went in that line. I've always been a female, a women's activist from a child. I would never read a book if there were only boys in the book. I would look for the storybook that also had girls. As a little girl, I was like that. And I wanted, and in the media too, I fought media from very early. Where are the Indian faces? Where are the Hindu faces? And that's basically, I'm a fourth generation born, found my ancestors on one side in Kanpur, and the other side, my mother, we think it's South Indian because of the culture, but we no other connection there. Thank you very much, Ji.
Right, terrific. Thank you. Let's go to Arvind Bisesha, please. You had to unmute yourself, and can you kindly also open your video camera?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there you
So
go.
it's okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to you for inviting me in this panel, in this very panel of these very senior people. When I hear you people speaking, if I may use the Hindi word, ऐसा लगता है कि छोटी मुंह बड़ी बात. I can say I'm among the generation who has for the past decade just entered in this world of Hinduism and Indian philosophy. Okay, just to introduce myself, from Mauritius, you discover India through the government of India. So we were awarded scholarship from Mauritius to go and study in India. It was long way back in 1995, studying in the University of Delhi, and from there starting to discover India. And I should thank the ICCR for giving us the opportunity to discover India there. So right when we are back in Mauritius, okay, we were here in the Indian community, in the Hindu community, but it made me, when I went to India, it made me discover myself and my identity when I went there. So coming back after 5 years of studies in the University of Delhi, then I realized, yes, you are from Mauritius, but you have a strong root in India back there. And then it all started with we entered the teaching of languages, Indian languages in Mauritius, and I've got the opportunity to join the Mahatma Gandhi Institute. I understand you guys, you know about the Mahatma Gandhi Institute. Is the institute with the name of the Mahatma, and also that promotes Indian culture, Indian music, Indian languages and all. From there, it was another discovering the Indian world, Hinduism and all. And luckily, I landed in the School of Mauritian and Area Studies, which has the Department of Bhojpuri, Folklore and Oral Traditions. It's quite interesting to know we are from North India. I'm proud to say I'm from Bihar. Okay, from which state? Some people I don't know, from the world, they say, you know, when we are from Bihar, it's something shameful. We are proud. We Mauritians, we are proud when we say we are from Bihar. We are from the northern part. And then I landed in a department where we got the opportunity to discover our roots. We have people from the 4th generation, from the 5th generation. And from there, it all started discovering the Indian culture, the oral traditions. But it was very nice for me to discover Indian culture, Indian traditions from the point of view as a Mauritian. I don't consider myself to be young, but I consider myself to be in terms of age, but in terms of knowing about India, knowing about Indian culture, I consider myself to be quite young in this field. My grandparents usually, I mean, most of you know the history of Mauritius. We are the premier, you can say, the experience when it comes to immigration. Way back in 1834, when the Atlas boat came in Mauritius with 75 people from North India, and then it started all the wave of Indian immigration in Mauritius, the great experience as we call it. And I'm proud that I have been part of, my grandparents have been part of the great experience. And then going back to the diaspora, but I mean, I should be thankful to you, the organizing committee there, that you're connecting us to the diaspora, to our people there in Trinidad. My name is Bisesa, and those people in Trinidad, you know, you might be connecting it to politics there in the other countries where you have people in Jamaica, in Trinidad, known as Bisesa. But it feels nice that, you know, Hinduism, Hindu culture, Hindu names are there in the diaspora. In a nutshell, I can just say that the world is very small. I considered myself to be a Mauritian. Now I consider myself to be a person of Indian origin of the world, and thanks to the to you organizing committee that have given us the opportunity to meet these people. So we'll be able to discuss many things there.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go to Dr. Anand Singh. Anand Singh from South Africa. 3 minutes if you can, please. Keep it under. You're on mute, sir. You had to unmute yourself. Ankur, can you unmute him?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm not going to say too much about the history in the 19th century about when Indians came. I just saw one provocative statement on the screen just now from a Dr. Anshu, somebody, I can't remember the surname, that migration from India to the colonies was a voluntary movement. I do not agree with that. I also find that a bit provocative, and I love to debate around that kind of issue. You know, you might remember, particularly those of you who are from Trinidad and Tobago, a Professor K.N. Sharma, who was among you guys, I think in the late 80s, early 90s. He was my guest here in 1992 when I convened the conference, the anthropology conference. And he used a phrase that stuck in my mind since then in one of his papers, that Indians were not moved out of India voluntarily, but in fact, it was a result of them being conned, coerced, and cajoled into going into these colonies. That for me is more of an accurate fit than what I would generally want to accept about Indians leaving India because they really wanted to escape it. We all know about the notion of crossing the Kala Pani and not wanting to be part of foreign cultures and the rest of it. So Indians never wanted to leave India. But by the time the British had actually eroded the social fabric of Indian societies, broke them down to a point of becoming beggars and dispossessed them of their land and their resources, they didn't have much more to depend upon. So going into the colonies certainly helped in many ways. But having said that, my roots go back to 1908, when my paternal grandfather came from Muzaffarnagar in UP. I think I am now, of course, my grandfather was one person that came. I don't know how far back my maternal family goes. But from that one man in 1908, I think there's something like 250 descendants, going up to about the fourth, if not fifth generation. I think I am about the only person in our extended family, if I may call it that, who has managed to at least establish some link with my ancestral village in UP. But I think sometimes, from what I gather, is that Muzaffarnagar now belongs to Uttarakhand. Those of you who might be from India might know better. But that's as far as it goes. With respect to where I am academically, I want to say something about myself that might make it look as though I am simply marketing myself. But I think by the time I'm finished my story in about a minute, you would understand why I'm saying this. I have a double master's and a PhD. My first master's was done at the University of Cape Town. Then I won the Nelson Mandela Scholarship to the London School of Economics. I came back home, big deal, double masters and all of that. The problem though, is that in about 1987, I was asked by the spiritual head of the Ramakrishna Center, where I used to, and I still go, to have the companionship of a sadhu. He said to me, I want you to join a feeding scheme. And like the very well-informed person that I was, in quotation marks, I said, yes, Swamiji, the black children are really suffering here. And he said to me, no, then you don't know what's actually happening to the Indians in this country. Now that was actually a very strong point for me, for the simple reason that sitting with 2 master's degrees from some of the most acclaimed universities in the world, I didn't know anything about my own background. Largely because Indian education in South Africa during apartheid and in the days of the University of Durban Westpool, where I did my undergraduate degree and I got my first job, sorry, not my first job, but when I got the more permanent appointment, that university was nothing more than a glorified high school. It did not teach us critical insights into literature or anything, because the apartheid strategists wanted us to be nothing more than secondary citizens. We fought a long and a hard battle, and when I became part of the feeding scheme, looking at Indians in a township called Phoenix, I realized the extent of poverty among people of Indian origin in South Africa. Because there is this general opinion that when people came to South Africa, they came virtually with nothing, and that all of them had really now risen to middle class status. A substantive number of South Africans have risen to middle class status. There's no doubt about that. But at least no less than 50% of people of Indian origin in South Africa still remain in the working, if not underclass movement. The underclass sectors. And that is where my journey with respect to the Indian diaspora began. So, have I covered my 3 minutes, Kalyanji?
Yeah, you have. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Great. We have one more person. Salesh Kumar from Fiji. Saleshji, please, you have to unmute yourself and you can speak.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you for this opportunity, and I think the Hindu University has, done a marvelous task in collaborating the diaspora on a very important topic. So I am basically, a lecturer in English language and linguistics at the University of Fiji. But as Ankur has said, I have also been engaged with the teaching of Hindi studies at the University of the South Pacific. My parents, are highly spiritual, and they've inspired me to attend Hindi and religious classes. So I'm very fortunate in this area, where I have been taught basic concepts of Hinduism by my parents. And this is quite rare. In the second section, I will talk about one of the challenges which deals with Hindu youths and why they are slowly, moving away from Hinduism. So I was lucky that I was able to, uh, uh, get the basic concepts of Hinduism, and which I'm trying to apply in my daily life today. I am the fourth generation of Indian here in Fiji, and this year marks 141 years of our arrival. So our ancestors basically started coming to Fiji from 14th May 1879, mainly to work on sugarcane plantations. But my great grandparents had worked on copra plantations. So my family history is not sugar, because my great grandparents were sent to copra plantations in the eastern side of Fiji. And the indenture system was basically a response to the labor needs of the British Empire, especially of plantation agriculture. And Sir Arthur Gordon, Fiji's first governor, who had experience with Indian laborers in Trinidad and Mauritius, found Indian laborers to be hardworking. So therefore, he requested the government of India to provide laborers. So around 60,000 Indians were brought to Fiji between 1879 and 1916, mostly from North India, and approximately 25% from South India. And the contracts from the indentured laborers required them to work in Fiji for a period of 5 years. And as the workers were generally illiterate, the system came to be known as girmit, which is derived from the word agreement. So because they could not pronounce the word agreement, it was known as girmit. And later, the laborers who came from India came to be called as girmitias. So poor standards of living conditions on the sugarcane plantations, advanced agitation by the laborers, and further public outrage also in India resulted in the abolition of the indenture system in 1920. Uh, no data on ethnicity has been released as part of the 2017 census, which was the last census held in this country. Thus, if I go back to the last official records, which is 2007 estimates, Indian people of Indian origin make 37% of the current population. So there was a time between 1956 to the late 1980s when the Indian population was much higher than the indigenous Fijian population, but due to discrimination and the 2 or 3 coups that we had in Fiji and the resulting brain drain, caused high international immigration, and most of the Indians from Fiji migrated to Australia, New Zealand, and USA was the third popular destination. Historically, I would say the Indian diaspora here in Fiji has struggled to maintain a comfortable relationship with the homeland India, wherein physical and ideological disconnect often overshadowed any traditional commonality. So many Fijians of Indian descent are clueless about which part of India their ancestors came from, including me. I only know that I came from North India, but in terms of tracing the roots, present-day Fiji Indians are not able to do. So basically, they are, as I've said, they're clueless about which part of India their ancestors came from. Many haven't visited their ancestral country yet, and it's not in their, if you ask any average Indian here in Fiji, they want to go to Australia and New Zealand, but they do not want to see, living in India or having a life here, in India. But what basically keeps us connected is the Indian film industry, Bollywood.
Okay. Okay, very good, great, excellent. Thank you all for your introductions. I want to move into a different segment now. And in particular, I'd like to frame it this way. Indrani ji said that when she went to Banaras Hindu University as a 19-year-old to rediscover her Hindu roots and learn Hindu philosophy, she was disappointed. And there are reasons for that. India was also deeply, deeply impacted by British colonialism and the educational system that the English left behind. after having completely destroyed the traditional learning environments, was primarily a British model of education. And I think, it is fair to say whatever little people learned about Hinduism in their schools and colleges was more or less the British opinion about the Hindus, which got filtered through the textbooks to whatever extent it actually did. Now, the question I want to pose is this, we're all, whether we are from India or from Mauritius or from Trinidad or from South Africa, or wherever we are from, we're all trying to recover our traditions and culture. We're engaged in a journey of restoration, rediscovery, and a reasonable level of transmission of this culture across the future, into the future generations. So I want to start with this question. What has it been like trying to maintain and preserve the Hindu traditions in the diaspora? What have been the challenges? What have been the surprising strengths in terms of how the Hindu community has been resilient despite very difficult circumstances? And what gaps continue to remain in terms of our ability to sustain and transmit the Hindu culture across generations? Okay, so that's a group of questions, and I'd like to go in the same order. Sharian, you can begin, please. Unmute yourself and you can begin.
Okay, I'll start off by saying that among the Indians who came to the Caribbean, around 80% were Hindus, 15% or so, 16% were Muslims, and the rest a mixture of Christian and others. But of course, the bulk were Hindus. I think from the very entry into the various Caribbean locations, especially in Trinidad and in Guyana and in Suriname, the Hindus, the Indians, but the Hindus we're speaking about here, they were engaged in different ways in attempting to promote or propagate or sustain their religion. For example, on the estates. I mean, on the estates, they were there simply to provide labor. But still, they found some time, some way, maybe from the 1860s, as early as the 1860s, you could see small, what we call kutiyas, very small, 3 feet, very rudimentary huts, where they would put an image or one murti, of course, not a very fancy murti, of a god, and that would be their worship place in a plantation. On the plantations also, you did have them recreating the Ram Leela, which is still alive today in many of the diaspora, Caribbean diaspora, Indian diaspora locations. So the Ram Leela was recreated for many years on the plantation itself. So they made those efforts from very early on, and sometimes on different plantations, almost every evening, you have these in official records. You would have the Indians, and when I say Indians, I mean in Muslims and Hindus, coming together, maybe sitting under a tree or by one of the barrack houses, and they would just recite from the Ramayana, the Ramcharitmanas. That was a very popular text, the most popular text, in fact, and it still is. So they would recite on almost a daily basis, it provided this kind of solace and so on to them. So from the early stages, Hindus were engaged in the process of preserving culture. Of course, at each stage of their lives in the Caribbean, this preservation would take a different form. So on the plantation, it took that form, very collective effort or efforts. And then when people moved out of the indenture system and attempted to create community, build their homes and so forth, a different dimension of effort of cultural preservation or reconstruction emerged, where yes, you had communities emerging. So you had on one level, you would have community-based efforts. So you would have the construction of mandirs and pathshalas where children will go to be taught the scriptures or to the language, Hindi. And then you would have on a more personal level where Hinduism would now be propagated in the homes, all right? So you have people with now putting emphasis on having, as Indrani ji said, pujas every year. A weekend would be set aside, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, where you would have that yearly puja, almost like a renewal. So on the family level, a personal level, on the community level, after indentureship, you had those attempts. And then, you know, as these attempts would not be static, they would be dynamic. So as years progress into independence, when the various colonies were no longer colonies, you know, a different element would come into play. Still the preservation of culture and religion, but let's say certain things would have already been put in place that they would have fought for during the colonial period. For example, Hindus got their marriages legally recognized in 1945 in Trinidad. All right, before that, no one married under Hindu rights only would be recognized as legally married, and worst even, their children would be seen as illegitimate. So many times, one of the challenges, these were two of the challenges, in fact, that Hindus had to face: the idea of their marriages not being recognized, and of course their children being seen as illegitimate. And many times, because of this idea of illegitimacy, if the parents died, the state would take the property away from those offspring. So those were some of the challenges that Hindus and Indians generally had to face during the colonial period. Post-independence, those would have been addressed. But of course, now you had, you know, a young independent nation. That's a new context. And the Hindus would have different elements to face, different challenges to face. You have a new government, yes, but the first government in Trinidad and even, you know, in other parts of the Caribbean, it didn't comprise many Indians or Hindus. All right, so politics would have been another area. Let's say post-independence, that Hindus would have these kinds of challenges. Another main challenge that Hindus had would emerge from, let's say, as early as 1920. And this was specifically Hindu, the idea of cremation. Hindus could not cremate their dead legally until the 1970s. So they just had to simply bury their dead. Discussions and debates happened at government level from the 1920s. It took a very long time, you know, back and forth. But from the 1970s, you know, concessions were made, etc., and cremation was allowed. By the 1960s, people started to just openly break the law and cremate their dead. Nobody, incidentally, was jailed for it or anything like that. In terms of strength, the whole experience of Indians in the Caribbean, Hindus in the Caribbean, the word that comes to mind, first of all, is resilience. Theirs was a very harsh experience. Indentureship throughout the Indian diaspora is a very harsh experience. And the fact that today in the Caribbean, in places like Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, Jamaica, Guadeloupe, Martinique, you have varying degrees of Hinduism present, but especially in Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname, it is remarkable that it has sustained, and not just sustained, but Hinduism has flourished in the Caribbean despite these harsh and trying conditions, early times. I think Hindus have a very keen ability or propensity to adapt. Nowhere in the diaspora can India be recreated wholesale, as you see. All right. So in each location, in Fiji, I'm sure you would have it, in Mauritius, in the Caribbean, for Hinduism to survive, you've had to have many levels and instances of adjustment, where if you don't adjust, certain elements just would not be able to survive. All right. So I think resilience, I think this idea, this propensity to adapt, to change, to not be static, that those were some of the strengths of the Hindu community in the Caribbean. In terms of texts, definitely from the very beginning of Indian indenture, the Ramcharitmanas was the most popular text. It still obtains today, but I think the Bhagavad Gita, because of its emphasis on philosophy and of course the changing orientation toward religion, where in the earlier period, maybe as late as the 1950s, the emphasis was on ritual, performance of these rituals and so forth. Yes, you know, you had the stories, you had the Puranas, you had the Vedas also, because we do have an Arya Samaj, small Arya Samaj presence in the Caribbean. So the Vedas are all propagated there. But in general, it is because of how, you know, people in the diaspora, Hindus in the diaspora were drawn from all parts of India. You had them from UP, from Bihar, from South India, from Bengal. So different Hindu traditions were brought. It was like a telescoping of traditions into the Caribbean. So you still see that mix, but of course, certain elements are more pronounced, what we would term today as Sanatana Dharma. Okay, so even within that Sanatana Dharma, you see various strands of Hinduism, maybe practiced in Bengal, practiced in South India, practiced in UP and Bihar and so forth, all right? And I think that lends to the richness of Hinduism in the Caribbean, in the diaspora generally, where, you know, all these strands comprise to form what I can say to be Trinidad Hinduism or Guyanese Hinduism or Surinamese Hinduism. Right, it's very rich. So, you know, similarly with the text, the Ramayana, I think, still is the most popular Hindu religious text among Sanatanist Hindus. But the Bhagavad Gita now plays a big role in terms of its emphasis on philosophy. And of course, you have the others being added to create that very intricate mosaic of religious knowledge. Okay? Yes.
Thank you. Let's give all the others a chance as well. Indrani ji, keep it brief if you can, please. We want to keep moving this conversation.
Thank you very much, Sherry, for your excellent presentation. And maybe Ankur could show our little table to show the different countries where this indentured labor went, these indentured workers, and to show the projection of Hindus in 2020 across the world. Across the indentured world, or what you would say, the jihadi world. So on the left there, Ankur, could we see the countries? On the left column. Is that big enough to see?
Yeah, we can see it.
Oh, I couldn't see it, yeah.
We can see it.
Okay, great. So you had like French Guyana. Maybe somebody could read it? I'm unable to read it. I just want the people to know the countries, the names of the countries.
So we have Fiji, French Guiana, Guadeloupe, Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica, Martinique, Mauritius, Natal, Republic of South Africa, Reunion, Seychelles, St. Lucia, St. Vincent Grenadines, Suriname, and Trinidad.
Right, so that's at least you can't go away from here without hearing the names of this indentured Indian diaspora, the Jahaji diaspora, the Girmitia diaspora. We also call it Jahaji, that's another one. They had their bundles with them. And on the extreme right is a projection of Hindus across this diaspora. And you will see Mauritius having the highest number of Hindus. Yeah, and as we go down, we see less than 10%, 10,000 in many other countries, but large numbers in the bigger ones. Guyana, we have like about 25% of the population is Hindus, 25%. Suriname at 22.3% Hindus. Trinidad, like a 22.5%. being Hindus, and that's a large number that you know is important in us keeping Hinduism alive in this part of the world.
So Indrani ji, just a quick question. In many of these places, the population has really dropped significantly. It has collapsed, right? Is that largely due to conversion, or is it because the people have migrated and moved out of these islands? What is the driver?
Those little ones, like less than 10,000, would have been ones that had initially had small numbers. Initially, the numbers they received through indentureship would have been small, and Jamaica lost a lot.
Okay.
But I want to say, you know, building on what Sherry spoke about, recouping the culture. The traditional institutions like the Guru Chela was very important in helping us to recoup. Satsang, the community events like the public yajna. We have a concept, a tradition in Trinidad, like you have the huge satsangs in India. We call like the yajna here, a Ramayana yajna. Everybody does that. You know, almost every weekend there is one. And personal pujas are very popular. And one of the problems we had was organizing ourselves to be heard by the government. So that's why, I mean, things like getting cremation done and any kind of reform, we had to be organized as a Hindu organization. And that brought about its own kinds of problems. The panchayat also was quite powerful. Panchayat did a lot in the beginning. The arrival of swamis and sons and scholars from India was very important. Up to now, we have their organizations, you know, alive in Trinidad. And
like,
we observed that.
What are some examples?
Like we have, you have the Chinmaya mission is very big now. You have the Kabir Panth that came earlier on. The Arya Samaj was one of those that came earlier on also. And we have several smaller ones, like the head would come and set up, there's a stream, you know, a sampradaya would be set up. So you got quite a few. And big one we got now is the one in, with the tallest Hanuman in the Western world. That's Ganapati, Swami Ganapati has done tremendous. And you know, it is said he's one of the few that came here and didn't take out money. In fact, he brought money from outside into Trinidad to build. That is the only, a huge South Indian style mandir that they have built, and the tallest Hanuman. So, and like Shari said, we're living in this homogeneous society, so it was easier. Now that's no longer so. One of our strengths was family life. That's breaking up as we move into nuclear family. So you find that is threatening, you know, our ability to retain. The politics is a big one for me, because I have found in the beginning, the politics, the sugar union, and the leadership and the religious leadership was the same. So now no sugar. Now you have the religious leadership is there becoming the political leadership and really not delivering to the Hindu. The Hindu agenda has not been articulated. The Muslims are a smaller community in Trinidad. I think less than 10%. We are 22-point-something%, and yet still the power that they can wield with governments and political parties is phenomenal. We are unable, Hindus are unable to do that. I think we don't have the smarts. As Hindus, we don't know how to negotiate across the border. We give everything in one basket. You have got to barter, you've got to negotiate both sides in democracy. This is the democratic style. And the failure of, we lack an enlightened Hindu leadership. Enlightened Hindu leadership. We have to come up from the ritual to a more scholarly kind of global understanding of our space. Where are we in the global space? Both nationally and then global, of course. And I think we have, I call them dysfunctional institutions. The mandir is being morphed from what it was meant to be, just go and do your puja. Now it's becoming an institution like a satsang. It's becoming equivalent like the church, so that you go there and you hear a message and you go away. So something's happening there that's good. That's good. We have had a media that's largely hostile. We suffer from low self-esteem because we don't see ourselves. And we have a weak social and personal dharma understanding. Very weak understanding of what social dharma is, personal dharma. We have a preference for professions. All our people are going into professions. You know, and nobody for the dharma. We don't revere the pandit or the person who is upkeeping the dharma. And not carte blanche. Of course, we have some who respect, but as a collective. And smaller countries like Jamaica and so on are not very visible. Now, let's not forget, Guyana and Suriname suffered tremendously from the political discrimination, racism against the Indians and the Hindus. Many Surinamese had to flee to Holland because of the kind of political discrimination that they had. And Guyana now, Guyana is like 4 or 5 months. The Indian-dominated party has won power, and 4 or 5 months they are not changing over. They keep holding on, and you know that the whole world is involved in that watch right now. So basically, we have lost our language. We have lost our language. And if you lose language, how are you going to understand when you chant Ramcharit Manas? UNESCO declares language to be the right of a child. My ancestral language is my right. How do I access my sacred knowledge? So with that, I want to pass on to the others. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Great. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to ask another question and then allow the others to pick up this conversation. How have Hindus been able to build up educational institutions at different levels to support and sustain their culture? Have we done reasonably well? Have we struggled? What has been our story in terms of bringing Hindu culture into the educational environments? So let's begin that with Arvindji from Mauritius, please.
Yes, sir. And you've jumped to the next.
But you can pick up the previous question also.
Of course. I would like to pick up from there, because when I hear our friends talking about the experience in Trinidad, in Fiji, and all, but we've got an altogether different story here in Mauritius. For example, when we talk about the, can you hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. When we talk about the stats in Mauritius regarding the Hindus, it's true that, I mean, the percentage of Hindus compared to the other religion, for example, the Creole communities in Mauritius, the gap is it's not widening, but it's getting closer. But that's not a problem. Conversion that you've talked about is there. That's it. But we all bring it there. The question of birth rate. Those who understand Hindi, they will understand. That Hindu mindset, ki hum do, hamare do, is there. It's all a question of adapting ourselves to the economic realities of Mauritius, whereas the middle class and the high class, where most of the Hindus belong here in Mauritius, but also about the migration. The level of education in Mauritius among the Hindus is very high. When we go back in 1901, when Mahatma Gandhi came in Mauritius from South Africa, when he was going back to India, and Gandhiji Bole The, Abhimanyu Anandji sums it well in his novel. He said that if the Hindu community in Mauritius wants to establish themselves, Gandhiji Bole The, he said that you get your children educated, and then get them interested in politics, and also, empowerment is important. So this is where the Hindu community picked up the Gandhi message there, and while educating their children, while giving priority to make their children and sending them to UK universities, giving them high-level education. So for them, the priority was educating the children, and not like trying to increase the number of members in the family as in other communities. So the Hindu community got educated. They are one of the most educated section in Mauritius these days. But the thing is, most of them migrated to Australia, migrated to England, migrated to the US, looking for grasses which are greener there. So nowadays, at one point of time, when the Hindu community, they were like 70% of the Mauritian population. Now they are like 48, and the Creole community is coming up. It's not a problem. Someone talked about the strong Hindu leadership. In Mauritius, we are very strong as far as political leadership is concerned. And the media in Mauritius has a very strong hold as far as the promotion and propagation of Hinduism is concerned. You'd be surprised, in Mauritius, we've got a channel, 24-hour channel for Bhojpuri program. Bhojpuri, which was a lingua franca of Mauritius, brought by the Indian community here, and still the second most spoken language in Mauritius. So we got a 24-hour channel for Bhojpuri, and Bhojpuri news, Hindi, Hindustani news, every hour in our local media, in TV, radio. We've got program on Indian culture, on Hinduism in the media. So the media is very much supportive of Indian culture in Mauritius. And we are proud. We always say, from Girmitia to government. You see, in Mauritius, the descendants of Girmitia, they are the prime ministers, they are the president of Mauritius. And also, when it comes to language preservation in Mauritius, Mauritius is among the rare countries in the world where you have, you know, the Indian languages. When I talk about Hindus, I talk about the other languages, Marathi, Telugu, Tamil, Urdu, all these. So they are very much here in Mauritius. We've got cultural centers, we've got all these for them. And also that thing of Sanatanist, and I talked about it during the preparation. These days, I can see an awakening of, at one point of time when there was that disparity between the Sanatanist and the Vedic in Mauritius. In these days, I can see a very positive thing happening, like, you know, these two Hindu groups coming together. These days, we are celebrating together the Hawan and all these things, and Shravan Mas, as we call it. And it's a national, it's becoming national in Mauritius. And how can I say? It's a strength. It's a strength in Mauritius. The resilience was there. We had to adapt. We had to fight the conversion thing. Yes, one section of the Hindu community, I won't name them, they went in that wave of conversion. But the Hindi-speaking people, they were not that much convinced by them. Okay, there are all type of things, pralobhan as we call it, all type of attractions being given, like going to talk with the poor people and all these things. But the adaptation was there, and unity is there. We can say here in Mauritius, unity is there. And our local culture, our local things are being recognized not only at national level, but also at international level. For example, recently, last year, during the Pravasi Bharati Divas, where our Prime Minister was the chief guest, they gave Mauritius to organize the International Bhagavad Gita Conference in Mauritius. And we've got so many institutions, the Ramayan Center, all these dedicated cultural centers, both speaking unions. You've got the Sanskrit speaking union, the Hindi speaking union, the Bhojpuri speaking union. 2nd November, which is national holiday in Mauritius, we celebrate the arrival of the Indian immigrants in Mauritius. In Mauritius, as you rightly mentioned, like the wave of Indian immigration that came here. I mean, I'm talking about all these reacting on what you people said, but other things are there. In Mauritius, Hindu symbols cannot be disrespected. I'll just take a simple example. I'm not talking about politics. The tradition of giving tulsi water to a person who is on his dying bed is very much respected in Mauritius. And in the last general election, I'm not talking about politics, I'm just talking about the strength of our traditions. In the last general election, one member of the opposition party, they just talked about it in front of a majority of non-Hindu audience. And overnight, the safeguards of Hinduism of Mauritius and Hindus condemned this attitude. And, everyone knows where it went. So you never disrespect any type of Hindu symbols in Mauritius. It's a unifying factor in Mauritius. We are all together celebrating festivals, national task force committee being set up for the celebration for the Mahashivratri, Ganesh Chaturthi, Diwali, Holi, Ganga Snan, Yugadi, Kavadi, Sankranti, Ramayan Katha. Shiv Puran ki Katha, Krishna Janmashtami, Ram Navami, just name it. It's just there. Now, coming to what you've said about the education, I'll just sum it up about the education, how educational institutions responded to this. In Mauritius, there was a big challenge some years back. It was back in 1994, in 1995, those days, where the non-Hindus, they protested about how can an Indian language be taken into consideration for 6th standard grading at the end of the primary education system, where students sit for the primary education final exams. So they said, no, the Indian languages cannot be taken into account because they give a priority to those who are not of Indian origin. And the matter went to court, and in the Supreme Court in Mauritius, they said, okay, no, the Indian languages cannot be taken into consideration. The government of Mauritius, I hear talk about some people who are very Hindu community leaders. They took the matter to the Supreme Court then, and then they take the matter to England. You know, in Mauritius, we follow the England constitution. So from there, they won the case, and the Indian languages are counted in exams in the school curriculum. And you have all the languages being taught at primary, secondary, tertiary level, at BA, MA, Master's, PhD level. And the culture also, we've got courses in Indian traditions, we've got a department of Indian philosophy at the Mahatma Gandhi Institute, the Indological department, Sanskrit department, Hindi languages being taught at all levels. I just recall a few things. Unless and until educational institutions respond to the need of preservation of culture and languages and religion in Mauritius, it won't in Mauritius, it couldn't have happened. But the government in Mauritius is very positive, and at educational level, at all level in Mauritius, we are taking care of it. And luckily, the government is supporting all these, and this is where our students are, our youngsters are connected with Indian culture, and they're connected with Hinduism.
Wonderful. So Arvindji, it looks like on the whole, it's a very positive and optimistic picture that is emerging from Mauritius. So I'm very, very happy to hear that. Let's go to Anand Singh Ji from South Africa. Your perspective. I want to acknowledge to the audience that we are going over time, but considering how fascinating this conversation is, let's spend a little bit extra time. We're not going to get these people together so easily very often, but let's hear from everybody at least one time. Anandji, your turn.
Thank you. Yeah, Arvindji, you could speak pretty positively about conditions in Mauritius because you're the majority there, Hindus. And wherever else people of Indian origin, particularly Hindus, are in the rest of the world, we are usually not just a minority, but often an insignificant minority. So we're not taken too seriously. But the fact that we've actually survived in itself is testament to our resilience and our ability to survive and to keep a tradition that has value in it alive and roaring in ways that certainly poses challenges to dominant ideologies. But before I go on to anything else, Ankur, may I just tell you that you've got two places written down there. That is Natal and South Africa. Now, Natal is in South Africa. So you should have, the data that you have with respect to Natal is what should actually represent South Africa. So having said that, I just want to say, you know, how did, if I got your question right again, so much has been said, the question is beginning to take a back seat in my so please bring me back to line, Kalyanji, if I might detract from anything. How did Hindus create institutions to ensure that at least some measure of religion and cultural ideologies are kept alive? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Now, you know, in South Africa, our experience was a little different in many ways. Fortunately, we did not have that case of forced burial that you've had in Trinidad and Tobago. As far as I know, cremation was allowed for quite a while, despite the fact that we lived under very politically hostile conditions. Many of our traditions were kept alive largely through the resilience of the home, the families, as well as the issues in temples. Temples generally were very linguistically oriented. In South Africa, like Malaysia, the majority of the migrants from India were from South India, particularly from Tamil Nadu. But we also have people who spoke Malayalam, Telugu, and then of course you had the Gujarati business families that came down who paid their own way. And because they paid their own way in South Africa, they were given the title of passenger Indians, as opposed to the indentured Indians who came at the cost of the British. Now, many of the temples were hardly centers of learning. They were more institutions of ritualism. The schools, on the other hand, were essentially English-oriented in the province of Natal, and Indian languages had virtually no say in it. They had to be promoted in ways that would have to take place as extracurricular activities. That means outside of school hours and in institutions such as the temples or to some extent. And then from about the 1950s, when the Ramakrishna Center was established in 1947, other ashrams and leadership structures began to emerge, very somewhat different from the temple associations. But, you know, the first Indians came to South Africa in 1860. Most Indians who propitiated and worshipped in their ways did so from their homes. Because as you know, Hinduism was not a communally based religion. And whatever we actually have to practice generally is within the household and turning within oneself, rather than communally engaging in worship. So to that extent, it might posit itself as a weakness against ourselves, yet the very same people who were Hindus for most of their lives, once they become Christian or Muslim, you see a totally different side to them when it comes to actually communalizing their efforts in trying to propitiate and propagate their religions. But when they are Hindu, they wouldn't do the same thing. And that is because there is a vast difference between the way in which, or the ways in which Hinduism is practiced. It is largely individualist in its approach. I stand to correction, or maybe we could have a different discussion of this at a different time. And because one has to turn inward to improve oneself, taking this idea in the same way that Gandhiji had once said, be the change that you want to see around you. So in other words, don't try to change everything else around you, but be that change, and everybody else would probably try to be influenced by you. So one has to worship in ways that actually is very individualistic. Now, it took more than 40 years, almost 47 years, before Hindus were able to be brought together under one umbrella. In somewhere around 1907, we had, long before any one of us were born, of course, we had Swami Shankarananda from Punjab coming to South Africa. From the readings that are afforded to us, he appears to have been a very evolved spiritual soul, very charismatic, tremendous in his leadership, and he brought all the different organizations together, whether it was Sanatanist, Advaitist, Dvaita Advaitist, Advaita Vedantists and all of those things, the Arya Samajists, the Sanatana Dharma, the Puranic ways of worship. He had managed to bring everybody under one umbrella. Unfortunately, he had the first conference in 1912, created the South African Hindu Mahasabha, but by 1913, he had decided to actually return to India. The charisma of his leadership actually left a vacuum because nobody could really emulate his act in many ways. But it somewhat revived. But of course, the South African Hindu Mahasabha, while they had affiliations over the years, certainly lacked in the kind of charismatic leadership that Swami Shankarananda actually had. This eventually gave rise to a number of other organizations. Most of the institutions, even though affiliated to the South African Hindu Mahasabha, continue to act on their own. The result is that we had very recently, in January this year, the formation of the Hindu Dharma Association of South Africa, which is still consolidating itself and will in many ways continue to engage with the community throughout South Africa and try to provide some kind of leadership that will embrace all of the other organizations in ways that will give them some kind of inspiration, hopefully. Now, coming back to the issue of education and institutions, people have moved away largely from ritualism and worship in temples. While they are still in existence and have their place in our society in South Africa, it is the Ramakrishna Center, the Divine Life Society, the ISKCON temples, the Sai movement, and the Arya Samaj ashrams and all of those places that now are beginning to worship through the leadership of sannyasins who have gained the confidence of the communities and are doing reasonably good work. The very important aspect about all of this here is that we continue, however, to articulate in English. We've lost our languages. There is a saying that the best way to deculturalize a person or a community is to take away their languages. So yes, I hear you, Indrani. You've lost your languages there in Trinidad and the West Indies, but it hasn't really killed the spirit of all the Hindus. And in many ways, there appears to me to be a resurgence of the want to have an internationally recognized identity for people who are of Hindu background. And the good thing is that we allow, in many ways, to identify with this diversity. It is the basis of democracy as it is perpetuated in so-called democratic countries. But above all, it starts in the Hindu home, and that we know. It's a strength in many ways that will be emulated in other parts of the world as well. The need for Hinduism is very important because they serve a great lesson to the rest of the world on how to cohabit and to be able to understand the other who does not believe in what you wish to.
Yeah. Very good. Very
I'll
good.
stop with that.
Wonderful. Very good. Thank you so much. Salesh Kumarji, your turn, and then I think you'll be the last speaker. We'll wrap up at the end of your segment.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief because the problems that we have, heard about in Suriname, in Trinidad, and other places are very much, similar to what we have experienced here in Fiji as well. So Hindus basically make up around 25% of Fiji's current population. And if you look at the Indian population alone, they make up, the Hindus make up more than 70%. Conversion did take place, but it is very minimal. You will see Hindu places of worship in every town and village where all religious observances are practiced, and any major religious events such as Holi, Ram Navami, Diwali, Raksha Bandhan, they are all celebrated. Ram Leela, just as my colleague has mentioned, in Trinidad, Ram Leela here in Fiji was also organized on a very big scale, but over the years it has somehow declined. 14th May is also, honored as Girmit Day to remember the contributions of the indentured laborers. Diwali is a gazetted national holiday for all Hindus here in Fiji. The Ramayana Mandalis are very much active in this country. So every week there is a designated day, and generally it is a Tuesday to recite from the Ramayana. And Ramcharitmanas has had a very significant influence on Hindus here, because the laborers got their strength and inspiration from Lord Ram's 14th-year exile. So they also thought, they need to keep on working despite the problems that they had, faced on the plantations, in the hope that things will get better. So they toiled day and night to provide a secure future for their children. So we have also had our share of problems during the colonial period, just as Trinidad and Suriname. And we have Indian leaders traveling from India during the time to provide spiritual and leadership guidance. And the earlier speakers have rightfully said that Hindus are a very resilient group. So we have, very much adapted to the new environment. One thing that the Hindus here have prioritized is education. But sadly, the parents favor education only for economic reasons. During the indenture, the Indian children were denied education rights. It was only reserved for the indigenous community and the colonial children. So despite that, there were informal schools operating in homes and village gatherings. And the first school that was opened by the Indian community was in 1918, which is towards the end of the indenture period. It was established by the Arya Samaj movement here in Fiji. Politics and religion were always mixed, and there were elements that tried to make Fiji a Christian state. This was particularly seen after the 1987 and 2000 coups, where there were anti-Hindu activities and destruction of Hindu temples and religious books by Christians. But fortunately, now we see that we are able to restore the calm and recreate a harmonious society. Indians are enjoying all the rights in terms of education, business, etc. Most of the Indians are engaged in the private sector because here they say Indians love money. So, the private sector is where they are able to, get the most out of it. In terms of major challenges, and I think I have talked about this in many places, the biggest challenge is the young Hindu youths who need inspiration to keep the faith, especially when they are faced with discrimination, peer pressure, and a major lack of knowledge. So the wealthier Hindus are more westernized, and I would say more westernized than the westernizers themselves. So now the children are becoming, Hindu parents want their children to become lawyers, engineers, information technology professionals. So majority of these kids come from wealthy families who do not go to temples regularly and have no knowledge of Hinduism. So the lower income group you will see are far more religious, but their religion is somehow emotional without much understanding. So they perform the worship on a daily basis, but do not know why. So, I mean, even if you go to Hindu homes, if you ask the youth who are the heroes, I think they probably name any Bollywood or Hollywood star. So, so we really need in this scientific age, and I would personally like to see the older generation sit with the children and share some of their experiences and how they have succeeded in life. When I was young, many elders have inspired me with this kind of talk. And if we really want to see a positive future for Hinduism, we need to bring a change in the lives of our Hindu youths, because the children are our future. Sadly, in Fiji, what we have seen, Indian children do not want to study Hindi in the present day. We have, all the resources and facilities, primary schools, secondary schools, tertiary institutions are offering Hindi as a subject, but sadly, the student numbers are drastically declining. And I think Indrani ji has rightfully said, once the language is lost, definitely culture is going to be lost too. And Hindi community, the Hindu community here has invested very much in terms of building temples, schools, and institutions. With the Sanatan Sabha, which is the biggest Hindu organization, manages 117 schools in the country. And they have approximately 70,000 students with them. The Arya Samaj, which is the first religious Fiji Indian organization established in Fiji in 1904. They also have a number of schools operating throughout the country. They have 14 primary schools, 6 high schools, and the university that I teach in, University of Fiji, is also managed by the Arya Samaj. We also have the Sangam organization running many schools, including a school of nursing. We have the Sikh Association of Fiji, we have Gujarat Education, and we also have the Ramakrishna Mission. Thank you.
Very good. Excellent. All right. I think we are well past our time, almost 30 minutes. I do want to thank everybody for participating today, for all the panelists for joining in from their respective places. And I hope this is the beginning of a new conversation. Hindu University of America is committed to the domain of education in Hindu studies. And I'm very keenly interested in exploring how we might establish partnerships with the Hindu communities worldwide in serving the cause of education in the Hindu studies area. With that brief comment, I'd like to give just maybe each of you one sentence or two, one or two sentences, very briefly, final words, and then we'll close the webinar, okay? Sharian Singh, you can start. You have to unmute.
Yes, I just want to say thank you to the Hindu University of America for including me in this discussion. There is so much to be said still about the Hindu experience in the Caribbean. I mean, a session like this can just barely cover one of the areas. I just wanted to add that, the experience in the Caribbean, it has showed a lot of things, but one of the things it showed is that, yes, we say, there's the idea that religion or Hinduism, it might be lost, if language is lost, then religion is lost. And I understand language has been very, very important to the propagation of religion and culture and so forth. But I would say that Hinduism has always been dynamic. From its very inception, which the date even is very blurry, but it has always been dynamic. And the experience of Hinduism in the Caribbean has shown that again, because Hinduism has survived in places like, especially like Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname even. It is very, very visible, and yet we may not be a replica of what obtained in India. But the point is, it has flourished in the Caribbean context. And yes, except maybe for Suriname, Hindi and Sanskrit, these are languages that you now formally learn. Even the dialects that came, the Bhojpuri and so forth, they're not spoken anymore. So yes, we do engage Hinduism, let's say in English primarily, okay? If we have to reach a younger audience, we have to use English. But I just want to say that, there are many factors that have led to the emergence and the flourishing of Hinduism in the Caribbean. And I think it will continue to flourish in the various areas. So, we take from the past, it's an experience where we rooted culturally in terms of religion in the Indian context, but we are now situated in a different context, and we have to find that balance of marrying both worlds to be able to survive in a different context, in a different place, in time and circumstance. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Final words, Indraniji.
Thank you, Jay. Let me say thank you very much to Hindu University of America for organizing this exploratory webinar where we are exploring the whole concept. And our friends from Suriname are a little sad that they're not on the panel. And the next time we're going to have to ensure we have something regionally, because it's very difficult to get them all together, too many panelists on the same. And finally, I want to invite everybody. We have a global Ramayana encyclopedia that's been organized by Ayodhya Research Institute and the government of India. In fact, all the countries are now getting via their missions this letter to work and collect data, everything related to Rama, the culture of Rama in your part of the world. And we'll be doing a webinar, an encyclopedia with written entries, with audio and with video entries. So thank you very much, Kalyanji. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Arvindji, unmute yourself, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Hindu University of America, for connecting us to the Indian diaspora and the Hindu diaspora. First time I'm meeting all our colleagues, and Kalyanji, aapko bhi bahut bahut dhanyawad. In a nutshell, I would invite you, if you want to discover Hinduism in the diaspora, the place is Mauritius. The place is Mauritius. I saw some comments about, you know, the Char Dham Yatra, whether the government of India is giving some incentives and all. Come here in Mauritius. The Ganga Talao pilgrimage is actually, those who've been here in Mauritius, the Ganga Talao pilgrimage, it is uniting the Indian diaspora. We've got people from South Africa, India, African countries, Europe, America. When you come here for Mahashivratri, you'll really feel how Hinduism is so powerful here in Mauritius. Hindus in Mauritius, heritage safeguarded. Heritage safeguarded in Mauritius is being acclaimed, is being recognized by UNESCO. When it comes to the fear that youngsters are losing sight or not interested in the language in Mauritius, in Hinduism in Mauritius, that's not the case here. I told you earlier during the preparatory, young Hindus are very much, just to give you an example, tomorrow there is a big dharna, a big rally of the Mauritius Swayam Sevak Sangh to promote Hinduism in Mauritius. And, you know, in Mauritius, Hinduism we are the only country, perhaps the only country in Mauritius where the government actually gives subsidy to religious institutions, to our shivalas, our temples, to keep on practicing their religion. Hats off to India for promoting Hinduism in Mauritius, and we are hand in hand. Chota Bharat Mauritius ko we say. And what I find very interesting, and I would conclude on that, when we talk about diaspora, you know, there is that migration process here in Mauritius, as I mentioned earlier. Many among the learned and the educated Hindus settling in US, Canada, England, and all, they are there, okay, going to look for the grasses which are greener. But I can see them, when they go there, they feel more connected to their religion. And I know many people there in Italy, in England, in US, they are there, they practice their religion, Hinduism, more than perhaps in India, more than perhaps in Mauritius. So this is a very important thing. And here in Mauritius, we are very happy. We are very proud that Hinduism is there, Hindu community at there is unity in diversity here in Mauritius. Just to give you a simple example, and up here, when there are Hindu festivals like the Ganesh Chaturthi, the Mahashivratri, the Holi festival, just name it, all festivals are celebrated with great pomp. Youngsters more attracted towards this. Kids singing Ramayana, Bhagavad Gita, they are singing the Holy Chautal, the Holy Dhammal in Bhojpuri language and all the languages, whatever you call it. And people from the other community participating in this. That shows how Hinduism is powerful in Mauritius. Thank you very much, Hindu University of America, and thank you so much, all the panelists.
Thank you so much. Sharian Singh ji. Keep it brief, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kalyanji and Hindu University of America. Appreciate it. I appreciate meeting each and every one of you on my screen, on our screens. Hopefully we will be able to meet personally at some point. I would just like to say that there are a number of issues that we can take forward from this initial meeting. The one thing that Hindus have been taken to do around the world was to grow sugarcane and to be agriculturalists. but we no longer are as much engaged in agricultural activities as our forefathers used to be. Some kind of record, I think, from this initiative should be brought to the fore in order to at least document this and in some way try to take this initial meeting further so that we might be able to capture the ongoing changes that are taking place. And hopefully this will not be the last of the meetings.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anand. Salesh Kumarji.
Yeah, thank you all for this webinar. It was 4 a.m.
Yes.
It was 4 a.m. here in Fiji, but I didn't want to lose this opportunity and engage in a very important topic, though it's a bit difficult to do justice to the topic in an hour or so, but nonetheless, the effort is very much appreciated. And I did mention to Indrani ji earlier in the week that we definitely should explore, future opportunities and how we could collaborate to bring the diaspora together. Overall, the Fijian government is very much supportive. All the religions here, are vibrant, which includes Hinduism. There is a healthy relationship with the government of India. The High Commission of India here in Fiji is very much supportive in terms of cultural and religious and education initiatives. Though sometimes I'm confused with the two terms because the Indian diaspora is usually used for the term people who were born in India but have now migrated overseas. And we are regarded as persons of Indian origin or descent here in Fiji, particularly maybe because there are no specific policies by the Indian government to look after these two groups of people. So I would like to see how, these two terms, usually the High Commission of India would regard as persons of Indian origin and not so much as the Indian diaspora. So maybe we could also look in that area as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Great. So I think we can conclude on that note.
Yes, just if I can, this webinar will be available by replay. I'm dropping the survey in the chat. If you fill it out, you will automatically receive the webinar replay. And I pulled the questions. I'm sorry to everyone. We weren't able to get through all of your questions in the chat, but we've pulled it. We'll look into it. And as everyone mentioned, this is the start of a long and important conversation, and we are going to continue this work at HUA. So thank you again, Kalyanji. Hand it back with that note.
Terrific. And thank you all for the audience for your patient listening. Thank you. Namaste, everybody. Namaste. Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste all.